Tonight, we begin with the warm, sun-drenched marble fantasy of ancient Greece, a place we love to romanticize, home of gods, philosophers, epic poetry, and democracy, a civilization that gifted us logic, architecture, and statues that were aggressively anti-pants. But peel back the marble, and you won't find golden ideals. You'll find something much harder, rougher, and if you were a woman, something inescapably worse. Because while ancient Greece shaped the foundations of the Western world, it also buried half its population beneath silence, shadow, and law. If you were female in this so-called cradle of civilization, your cradle was a cage. But don't worry, we'll get there slowly. So dim the lights. Turn on a fan for that background hum. Wrap yourself in something soft, preferably not a linen tunic pinned with hope and a single brooch. And let's drift backward to a world where your rights didn't exist. Your job was to stay invisible, and the gods might turn you into a tree if you stepped out of line. Welcome to ancient Greece, and good luck surviving the morning. Ancient Greece is praised as the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and rational thought. But here's the problem. That birth excluded women entirely. You couldn't vote. You couldn't speak in court. You couldn't even walk outside alone without being seen as suspicious, scandalous, or Spartan, which in Athenian terms was all three. And that wasn't a glitch in the system. That was the system. If women had been allowed to speak, learn, lead, or live with the slightest autonomy, the entire social structure would have collapsed. The men could debate justice and truth in the agora precisely because women were grinding grain in the shadows. This wasn't about balance, it was about containment. So tonight, we're not telling the story of ancient Greece the way it wants to be remembered. We're telling it from behind the latticework, from the gynaecon, the women's quarters, from inside the sweat, silence, and sandals, and we'll ask the only question that really matters. Would you survive a single day as a woman in ancient Greece? Spoiler, not without crying, sunstroke, or divine intervention. You are born on a warm evening in Athens. Your mother screams into a bundle of linen soaked in river water. There is no doctor, just a midwife, older than most of the jars in the house, murmuring prayers to Artemis between contractions. A neighbor girl holds a clay bowl under your mother's hips. The men have stepped outside, not for decency, for indifference. This is not a celebration. The room smells of blood and smoke and fear. And when your first cry splits the silence, no one cheers. There's only one question anyone cares about. Is it a boy? It's not. You are a daughter, and that changes everything. In ancient Greece, a daughter isn't an heir. She's a liability. A son means land stays in the family. A son means a future voter, a soldier, a citizen. A daughter means your father now owes a dowry, property, livestock, or silver, just to pass you off to another man. You are born in debt. Some families can't afford that debt, and in those cases, they make a different choice. Infant exposure wasn't rare. It was routine. The practice was simple. If the child is sickly, deformed, or female, she's left outside the city walls, not murdered, not executed, just exposed to the sun, the cold, the wolves. Let the gods decide. And most of the time, the gods don't bother. Philosophers like Aristotle supported it. Plato, too, because eugenics wasn't a horror in ancient Greece. It was policy. So if you're still breathing by morning, consider yourself lucky, not wanted, but tolerated. You are wrapped in linen, placed on a woven mat in the women's quarters. No announcement, no feast. Your father may not even hold you. You're one more mouth to feed, one more coin to save for someone else's future wedding. Your naming ceremony, if it happens at all, will come late. Girls are usually named a month after birth. Boys get theirs at 7 days. Already, you're behind. Your name will be soft, possibly after a grandmother, but it won't be remembered. Your tombstone, if you ever get one, will mention your husband's name, not yours. Your birth is not the beginning of a legacy. It's a pause, a waiting room, a placeholder in someone else's story. Your mother loves you, maybe, but even she knows what's coming. She will train you, shield you, warn you. She will teach you how to fold your voice into corners, how to swallow anger without chewing, how to stretch a single hour of rest into enough strength to face tomorrow. She will never speak of her own childhood because it looked a lot like what yours will be. Outside, men pass in the streets, olive-skinned, barefoot, free. They speak of justice, of virtue, of city and soul. They quote Homer, praise Pericles, curse Sparta, and vote in the ecclesia. Inside, you're learning to sleep beside the fire so you don't freeze. You're learning to be quiet. You're learning not to exist too brightly, because the brighter a woman shines in ancient Greece, the faster she gets extinguished. You're 5 years old. You've learned to thread a needle before you've learned to write your name. Not that you'll need the second skill much. You'll spend the next few years mastering the domestic alphabet. Spindle, comb, pot, grindstone. Your classroom is the hearth. Your curriculum is silence. There is no school waiting for you. Not in Athens. Not if you're average. Not if you're poor. Formal education is for boys, for future citizens. They are trained to argue, to calculate, to lead. You are trained to disappear. Your brother is 6. He's learning to read Homer. You hear him reciting verses with your father, loudly, with pride. They talk about Odysseus, about Achilles, about gods and glory and destiny. You're nearby, kneeling on a mat, washing olive oil from a cloth your mother bled into last week. He's being taught about honor. You're being taught about stains. You want to run in the courtyard. Your legs itch for it. You try once, a full sprint, laughing, and your mother yanks you back so hard your shoulder aches. Girls don't run like that, she says. Not outside. Not where someone might see. Outside is for men, or goats. You begin to learn the layout of your world, how far you're allowed to go, how loudly you're allowed to laugh, how long you're allowed to speak before someone frowns. Inside the house, there is some softness. Grandmother hums while she weaves. You sleep curled beside your sister on a mat stuffed with straw. You dream of lions, chariots, golden olives. You are still a child, for now. But childhood ends early here. Puberty is not just a milestone. It's a transfer of ownership. You start bleeding? You're marriageable. Not in 10 years, not in 5. Now, your breasts swell, your voice softens, and suddenly, everything you used to do freely becomes dangerous. You're warned not to talk to the water seller. You're told to keep your shawl tighter. You're not allowed near the fountain without a servant or older relative. People are watching, and what they're watching for is fault. You begin to understand your body isn't really yours. It's being prepared, cleaned, shaped, hidden for its next owner. You are your father's property. Soon, you will be your husband's. There is no talk of romance, no stories about love, unless it's a myth where someone dies at the end. The stories you're told are cautionary. There's Pandora, the first woman, blamed for all of mankind's suffering. There's Medea, who dared to feel rage. There's Antigone, who dared to disobey a man. In Greek tragedy, a woman who speaks too loudly is punished. In real life, the punishment is quieter, but it still comes. You are 9 now. You help carry jars. You help crush grapes. You know how to shape bread, how to comb lice out of hair. You've seen a neighbor girl sold into marriage at 13. She cried during the feast. No one stopped her. No one acknowledged it. Better to cry at your wedding than after it, someone said. That's the joke. That's the lesson. That's the world. You're 12 years old when your mother tells you to stop smiling at the baker's son. Not because he's bad, not because you've done anything wrong, but because soon someone will pay to own your smile, and that price goes up if no one's touched it yet. Your childhood isn't ending. It's being sold. Puberty arrives fast. You wake up one morning and your body's different. Your chest aches. Your hips widen. Your voice seems quieter now. Even when you're not speaking, the moment your period comes, everything shifts. Your mother notices before you tell her. The way she looks at you changes. There's no celebration, just a silent kind of grief. Like she knows what's coming next, because she does. Marriage in ancient Greece isn't about love. It's about property, about forming alliances, about transferring wealth and wombs from one household to another. In Athens, most girls are married by 14 to men in their 30s or older. You may never see his face before the wedding. You may not be allowed to speak at the ceremony. Your father negotiates the match. Your mother prepares you for the night. The man, your future husband, might visit once before the wedding to inspect the dowry, but no one asks what you want because it doesn't matter. You're not the bride. You're the bridge between two men's assets. Your dowry is calculated in drachmas. If your father is poor, it might be a few goats. If he's wealthy, maybe silver or land. The bigger the dowry, the more desirable the bride. And if something goes wrong, if you're barren or disobedient or too loud, your husband can return you like bad grain. He'll keep the dowry, though. That's why you're taught to be small, obedient, unnoticed. You're not a wife yet, but you're being trained for the role. Sit still, eat less, look down, don't speak unless asked. Never question a man, especially not in public. You hear whispers from older girls about the wedding night, about pain, about blood. You don't ask questions, not because you aren't curious, but because no one would answer you. Instead, you're given rituals. You take a ceremonial bath the day before the wedding. You wear saffron-dyed robes, not white. You offer your toys, your last symbols of girlhood, to Artemis, goddess of the hunt and protector of virgins. It's supposed to be symbolic, but it feels more like a warning. The night before your wedding, you sleep next to your mother one last time. She braids your hair tightly. She doesn't cry. She's done this before. Her mother did it for her. You ask her if it hurts. She says nothing, just tightens the braid and tells you to be brave. When the day arrives, you're led through the streets, veiled, silent, decorated like an offering. A torch-lit procession carries you to your new home. You ride in a cart pulled by oxen. You aren't allowed to look back. Inside the house, a feast is already underway, but not for you. You are taken to the women's quarters, now your new prison, while the men drink wine and toast your father's good fortune. Later that night, you'll be undressed, quietly, quickly, without ceremony, and you'll lie beside a man who may not even know your name. You're not a child anymore, but you're not a woman either. You're a transaction, and the deal is done. There's music outside your door, but it's not for you. The lyre hums. Voices echo down the courtyard. Sandals scuff over limestone. Men are laughing. They're drinking wine from painted craters, tossing out proverbs and predictions about how many sons you'll produce. You sit alone in a new room. You've never slept here before. You've never even seen this house before today. But it's where you'll live now. You don't know the floor plan, or the servants, or which corner is warm in winter. You only know this: you're not going home. The wedding ceremony itself was brief. At least your part was. You were walked in a straight line from your father's home to your husband's. That's it. A procession. One house to another. No vows. No speeches. Just torches, grain offerings, and a chariot pulled by animals. The moment you stepped through his threshold, your Kyrios, your legal guardian, transferred from your father to your husband. Ownership. With a smile, you gave up your surname, your family, your childhood, your gods. Now you are his. You weren't allowed to sit with the men at the wedding feast. That space was for citizens. You weren't one. You sat in the back with the other women. Maybe you had a few olives. Maybe a slice of honey cake, if someone remembered. But mostly you sat, watched, listened. Later that night, they toasted your chastity, your silence, your invisibility. They clinked ceramic cups and made jokes about breaking colts and training oxen. You are the colt. You are the ox. And you are not supposed to laugh. There's a bed in the corner of the room now. Simple, wooden, covered with animal skin. Your new husband will arrive soon. You were told to make yourself ready. That meant bathing, combing your hair, and lying very still. The word consent doesn't exist in ancient Greek. Neither does privacy. Some families make jokes as they leave the couple alone. Others don't leave at all. Tonight, you're expected to bleed. If you don't, there will be talk. If you cry, no one will mention it tomorrow. In the morning, you wake up with thighs sticky from dried blood, your mouth dry from fear. You hear the clatter of sandals, early conversation, servants sweeping. No one knocks. No one checks on you. You rise, wrap your hymation around you, and begin your day like every other woman. Cleaning, fetching, kneading dough, and listening to the house breathe around you. You're not a guest here. You're a fixture. You are now the wife. And the ceremony is over. The door closes behind you, and you know you won't open it again without permission. You are now mistress of the Gymnasium, the women's quarters, mistress in name. But don't let the title fool you. It doesn't mean power. It means containment. The room is small, warm, and dim. There are no glass windows, just shutters, angled to let in light without letting you be seen. You have a loom in the corner, a few low stools, an old amphora that smells faintly of olive brine, and a cat that doesn't belong to anyone, but won't leave. This is your world now. You might go to the courtyard for chores. You might visit the storerooms or press olives in the back shed. But the street, the market, the city beyond, forget it. Your job now is to stay and to serve. In theory, you're the queen of this domain. The household is your kingdom. The servants, your subjects. The kitchen, your treasury. The linens, your armor. But real queens give orders. You receive them. Every morning begins the same. Before sunrise, the stone floor beneath your feet is freezing. Your tunic clings from yesterday's sweat. If your household is wealthy enough to have slaves, you supervise them. If not, you are them. You sweep, you knead, you light the fire, you fetch water from the cistern, or worse, from the public fountain. Your eyes down the whole way, wrapped so tightly in your shawl, you feel like you're breathing through wool. By mid-morning, you're spinning wool. By afternoon, weaving, always weaving. One mistake in the pattern, and you have to undo hours. If your husband finds a hole in his cloak, you'll hear about it. The loom is not a tool. It's a sentence. You eat separately from the men. Always. Sometimes not until they're done. You prepare the food, you serve it, and then you wait in silence, behind a curtain. If they're drunk, the jokes turn crude. Sometimes they call you in to play the lyre or pour more wine. You go. You don't look anyone in the eye. You don't speak unless spoken to. You are praised for being quiet. You are valued for being still. Once a month, when your bleeding begins, you're considered ritually polluted. You stay further from sacred spaces, from the hearth. Some women aren't allowed to cook during this time. It's never explained. It just is. You use rags. Try not to stain anything and pretend not to notice the discomfort. If a man finds your blood, it's your shame. If it drips on the floor, it's an omen. The only time you leave the house, truly leave, is for religious festivals, funerals, or your own funeral. Even then, you're covered head to toe, flanked by male relatives, forbidden to speak loudly or laugh. Outside, the agora hums with debate. Men argue politics, watch plays, philosophize. You can hear them from the shutters. You will never speak there. Your mind is sharp, but there's no one to sharpen it with. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and the loom is clicking like a heartbeat, you speak to yourself. Just a whisper, a joke, a thought, a dream you had once, and that whisper feels dangerous because it's still yours, and nothing here is supposed to be queen of the household. That's the polite fiction. In truth, you are warden and prisoner, ruling a kingdom you cannot leave, commanding servants you cannot truly protect, raising children for a city that doesn't acknowledge your existence. Your realm has no throne, only a stool and a spinning wheel. Your husband is not home often, but his expectations always are. He doesn't need to speak them. They live in the walls, in the way food must be placed, in the silence that greets him. You learn to read his moods from the pressure of his footsteps alone, and you learn something else, that your body is not yours. It never was. The city doesn't say it outright, but it knows. Your womb is the currency of the polis. You're not expected to think. You're expected to breed. Your primary duty, repeated in prayers, in gossip, in casual remarks from passing matrons, is to produce sons. Not children, sons. Girls are expenses. Sons are legacy. If you have one, your status rises. If you don't, your dowry might not be enough to keep your husband's attention. If you have too many daughters, you start hearing jokes about bad luck. You start hearing silence where there used to be company. You feel shame seep into the air like incense. You are pregnant now. No one asks if you're ready. There's no such thing. This is what you're for. You carry the weight quietly in a home without heat, without painkillers, without help. The baby kicks. Your back breaks. Your ankle swell like bruised figs. There's no doctor, just herbal remedies, whispered prayers, and old women who tell you not to sit under the moon too long. Bad spirits might slip in. You believe them. What else do you have? When labor comes, it's not in a bed. It's in a crouch, on a clay floor, with blood thickening between your knees, and hot towels you had to heat yourself. If the baby lives, you're lucky. If you live, you're rarer still. Childbirth in ancient Greece is not a rite of passage. It's a game of odds, and the odds aren't on your side. There is no anesthesia, no antiseptic, no margin for error. You scream so loud, you scare the dog into hiding. You pass out halfway through. When you wake up, you see a tiny face. You wait for a reaction from the midwife. She doesn't smile. She just says, "It's a girl." You don't cry. You nod. You ask if she's breathing. Then you ask, carefully, if your husband has heard. You hope he's drunk, or distracted, or at war. Because sometimes, when men hear it's a girl, they ask no questions. They just open the door and walk toward the riverbank. But the girl lives, this time. And you love her, quietly. You rock her at night and whisper stories. Never too loudly, never too brightly. You tell her the names of stars she'll never be allowed to study. You trace letters into her palm when no one's watching, and when she sleeps, you press your lips to her forehead and wonder how long you'll be allowed to keep her, because you know the city already wants her body, too. It happens quickly. A knock at the door while your husband is away, a neighbor asking for salt, a cousin stopping by, a servant entering unannounced. You pull your shawl tighter. You lower your gaze, because in this house, in this city, in this world, if a man is alone with you and anything happens, it's already your fault. Let's be clear. There is no concept of sexual consent in classical Athens. Not legally, not culturally, not morally. You, as a wife, are property. Your body is considered a vessel for another man's bloodline, and anything that contaminates that bloodline, even the possibility of it, is a civic crisis. Not because you were harmed, but because a man's rights were threatened. Adultery is not a private matter. It's not even a moral matter. It's a legal emergency. If you're caught with another man, whether it's an affair or a forced encounter, your husband is required by law to divorce you. He could also kill the man involved on the spot without penalty. That's called justifiable homicide. And what happens to you? That depends. If your husband is powerful, you might be sent back to your father's house in disgrace. Your dowry gone, your name ruined. If you're poor or inconvenient, you're discarded silently. It doesn't matter if you said no. In fact, the law doesn't recognize the idea that a woman could say no to a citizen man. In Athens, rape was a crime against the male guardian, not the woman. She is the object. The damage is to his honor, his bloodline, his household's value. You're not even listed in the trial documents. Your testimony is considered unreliable by default. Women were legally barred from speaking in court. Your husband, brother, or father must speak on your behalf, and if they choose silence, you disappear. The only time your body matters publicly is when it's being defended as a man's possession. If you're a virgin girl, your father protects you like a locked chest. If you're a wife, your husband may guard you like a prized tool. But if you're poor, enslaved, or inconvenient, your body is available, not openly, but quietly, culturally, with legal backing. There's a reason women in Athens were expected to never be seen in public without male supervision, because any interaction, any accusation, even false, could ruin a family. A mere rumor of infidelity could spark divorce, exile, or worse. And that pressure, it doesn't fall on the man, it falls on you. You wear shame like a second tunic. You live inside whispers. You speak only to other women, and even then, only in fragments. Because one wrong story, even true, could destroy everyone you know. And here's the quiet horror. You start to believe it's your fault. You remember every moment you stepped too close to a doorway, every time you looked too long at the wrong pair of eyes. You recall being 12 and someone's hand lingering too long at a festival, and your mother gripping your arm tighter afterward but saying nothing. The guilt isn't just taught, it's carved like letters in marble, permanent. In your house, you're expected to be silent, but in your city, people sing to women. They raise statues to them, build temples, offer garlands and incense, and sacrificial goats. The names echo across marble columns: Athena, Artemis, Demeter, Hera, Aphrodite, the gods of war, knowledge, family, and love? Men. But the goddesses? They are everything else. Mothers, virgins, wives, warriors, monsters. And from the moment you were born, you were told, be like her, be like Artemis, strong, wild, untouched, but stay inside. Be like Hera, queen of marriage, but don't complain when your husband cheats. Be like Demeter, nurturing, fertile, But don't ask what happens if your daughter is stolen. Be like Athena, wise, brave. But remember, she never had children, never married, never bled. Even the ideal woman in Athens had to be desexed before she was powerful. Every god gets a temple. Every goddess gets a warning. You visit Artemis's shrine once, before marriage, to dedicate your childhood toys, to leave behind the part of you that climbed trees and whispered at the moon. After that, you pray in private. Public worship is for men. Even in the festivals dedicated to female deities, you are rarely seen. Your husband might shout hymns to Hera and still ignore you at breakfast. He might burn offerings to Demeter and not speak to his mother. He'll write verses about Aphrodite's beauty and punish you for wearing perfume. And then there's Athena, goddess of wisdom, war, justice, and strategy, patron of Athens itself, a warrior in armor, a virgin by choice, a mind sharper than any man's. Your city is named after her, but you couldn't set foot in the assembly. You couldn't argue a case. You couldn't speak in public. And if you did, they'd call you unnatural. Natural. The irony burns deeper the more you think. Men worship women only when they're not real. You're not allowed to speak. But Athena was born from Zeus's head, fully armed, shouting battle cries. You're not allowed to own property. But Demeter was worshipped as the goddess of the harvest, of land, of sustenance. You're not allowed to choose your husband, but Aphrodite, she chooses everyone. And yet here you are, silent, unseen, kneeling in a private corner, offering a few grains to a marble statue whose face has never been touched by sweat or childbirth or fear. You still believe in them, not because you're naive, but because you have nothing else. You whisper to Hecate in the dark, asking for protection. You press your palm against Demeter's altar and ask her to watch over your daughter. You light a lamp for Artemis, even though you can no longer run. And sometimes, when you're alone, you imagine the goddesses listening, not as deities, but as women, as the only ones who might truly understand. You wake up bleeding, not the kind that marks a new moon, but the kind that feels wrong, heavy, sour smelling, deep in your hips. You try not to cry out. The baby had been moving just days before, tiny flutters like a hand brushing against a curtain. Now, stillness and blood, too much of it. You press your hands between your thighs and wait. There is no doctor to call. There is no word for miscarriage in your language that carries compassion, only shame. You call for a servant, or a neighbor woman, or your mother if she's still alive. She brings cloth, maybe honeyed wine, maybe a priest. But the blood keeps coming, and soon it's everywhere. You pass the fetus in the dark. No one lets you hold it. They take it away, quietly, like a mistake being erased before someone notices. You are not allowed to speak of it later. There will be no funeral, no mourning, just a hushed remark. At least it wasn't a son, because that's the truth. You're not expected to love your daughters the same way. If it had been a boy, the household would have been cursed by the loss. A potential heir, a shield in your old age, a citizen, a voice in the assembly, a man. But a daughter, she is just another dowry that must be paid, another future bride to be silenced and passed along like a crate of dried figs. And yet you loved her. You loved all of them, the ones who lived, the ones who didn't. You remember the time your second girl laughed at rain, or how your third clung to your ankle while you stirred porridge, or how your fourth, the one with the solemn eyes, asked if men could bleed too. You didn't know what to say. You still don't. Your husband says nothing about the miscarriage. He walks in, smells the smoke and the iron in the air, and walks out again. Later that night, a friend of his makes a joke at the symposium. She must be too emotional. That's why her womb rejected the boy. They all laugh. You're not there to hear it. But the silence he brings home is louder than any punchline. And now, the worst part, you have no sons. No male child has survived beyond infancy, whether from plague, fever, or God's whim. Each one has vanished like smoke. You've done everything. Prayed, sacrificed, fasted, obeyed. Still, they die. Your mother says it's bad luck. The midwife says it's your temperament. Your husband doesn't say anything anymore. But you feel the shift. You are a liability now. Some women in your position are sent away, quietly, back to their father's house, if he'll take them. Others are replaced, either through quiet affairs or loud new marriages. A man can take another wife if he wants. No trial, no scandal, just replacement. A fertile woman for an infertile one. A useful vessel for a cracked one. You still bleed. You still carry water. You still serve at the hearth. But you can feel your value evaporating. And no one tells you what happens when it's completely gone. You're not just grieving a child. You're grieving your last chance to matter. And it's the kind of grief that doesn't make a sound because it's not allowed to. You figured it out young. You weren't supposed to ask questions. At first, the signs were subtle. A stern look when you asked your father what a rhetor was. A dismissive wave when you tried to follow your brothers out the door with your reed stylus in hand. Later, the signs grew sharper. Why does she care about that? Go help your mother. Your job is to spin wool, not words. You were clever. Everyone saw it. But no one said it as a compliment, only as a problem. In Athens, boys start formal education at 7. They learn poetry, arithmetic, music, logic, and debate. They memorize Homer and argue philosophy beneath fig trees with men 3 times their age. They are trained to speak in court, to command ships, to lead armies. You are taught how to fold linen without creasing the edges. You are taught how to walk without your sandals making noise. You are taught to be small, and you learn that too. Much thought makes you less marriageable. You wanted to read. You wanted to write. But the scrolls are in the andron, the men's quarters, and you are not allowed there. You press your ear to the wall and hear your brother reciting Hesiod. You whisper the lines to yourself later, copying the rhythm with a stick in the dirt. Afraid the wind will erase your words before you've remembered them. You steal knowledge, because no one will ever give it to you. Sometimes, another woman teaches you a thing or two. Your aunt who grew up near the temples of Eleusis tells you about the stars. An older slave teaches you how to track moon phases for planting and bleeding. A neighbor girl shows you how to count stitches while mouthing times, tables. It's all done in fragments. like breaking off pieces of a forbidden fruit and hiding them in your apron. You ask once, nervously, if Athena, goddess of wisdom, would be proud of a clever girl. Someone laughs. Athena is not like other women. She was born from Zeus's head. No mother, no weakness. That's why she's worthy of temples. The message is clear. To be respected, you must not be like you. So you learn to fold your mind inward, to solve things silently, to reason while threading a needle, to recite poetry while stirring lentils, to debate yourself while scrubbing soot from the hearth. Because if you speak too much, you're mocked. If you know too much, you're feared. If you question too much, you're dangerous. Socrates walks through the agora, surrounded by eager students. Plato writes about the perfect society. Aristotle tutors a boy who will conquer the world. And you mend socks. But here's what they don't know. You remember everything. You remember the stories, the rhythms, the debates overheard through doors. You remember what it's like to love ideas. And maybe, just maybe, you whisper your own thoughts to your daughters before bed because you want them to know what you were never allowed to believe. That thinking isn't a flaw, it's a flame. Even if you have to keep it hidden, you live in the heart of Athens, but Athens does not see you. You are not a citizen. You are not a voter. You are not a name anyone will remember. And yet, you are the one keeping it alive. You wake before dawn, when the city is still blue and quiet. You grind the grain, light the hearth, sweep the floor with a branch broom, fetch water from the public fountain. You pass men on the street, but never make eye contact. A glance held too long is an invitation, and an invitation is a risk. You draw your hymation tighter and keep walking. Your destination is the fountain, the only public place you're expected to visit. There, you lower your voice, avoid the gaze of passing merchants, and exchange hurried words with other women under your breath. A neighbor mentions that the price of olive oil has risen. You nod, but don't say much. If a man overhears and thinks you're criticizing policy, you could be accused of being too curious. And curiosity, that's another word for dangerous. You return home, back to the gynaeconitis, the women's quarters, room that is both your sanctuary and your cell. You sew, you spin, you raise the children, you nurse the sick, you plan meals, you keep accounts in your head because no one will teach you numbers. You teach the slaves. You pray at the altar. You protect the household gods. And when your husband invites his friends over, you disappear. You're not to be heard, not to be seen. Even your laughter is a liability. It might sound too loud, too opinionated, too alive. If you're mentioned at all in the symposium, the elite male dinner party, it's in stories, as a ghost, as a punchline, as a moral warning. The city praises female modesty, but modesty is a euphemism for erasure. You cannot perform in the theater. You cannot speak in the assembly. You cannot own land outright. You cannot witness in court. Even your name isn't written in public documents unless you're accused of something, or someone needs to list your dowry like livestock. And yet, who maintains the temples? Who weaves the cloth? Who raises the soldiers? Who buries the dead? Who upholds the rituals that make Athens Athens? You do, silently, invisibly, tirelessly. You hear of a woman once, Aspasia, companion of Pericles, said to be intelligent, witty, influential. But she was a foreigner, a metic. She could not marry, could not vote, could not own a home in her name. She's remembered only because powerful men whispered about her after dark, not because she spoke aloud in daylight. And sometimes you wonder what would happen if every woman in Athens stopped, if the looms fell silent, if the water wasn't fetched, if the bread wasn't baked, the sick untended, the gods unpraised. What would happen if all the invisible hands simply let go? But no one asks. No one imagines the city falling without you because they've convinced themselves you're not even there. They never needed to pass a law saying women couldn't speak. Culture did it first. By the time you're old enough to form thoughts worth sharing, you've already learned the rules. Don't raise your voice in public. Don't interrupt a man. Don't talk too much, even at home. And whatever you do, don't be clever in front of guests. Cleverness is masculine. Cleverness is threatening. Cleverness makes people talk. And when people talk, you disappear. In Athens, women aren't allowed to represent themselves in court. If you're accused of something, someone else, a male relative, must speak for you, even if you know the truth, even if it's your life on the line. Your voice doesn't count, literally. And if you're the accuser, if you dare to bring a complaint to defend your property, your body, your dignity, then you're unnatural. Because a woman with grievances is a problem. A woman with words is a threat. A woman who's persuasive, dangerous. Ask yourself this: what stories do we remember of ancient Greece? Socrates, on trial for corrupting the youth. Demosthenes, moving crowds with words. Pericles, delivering orations to armies. Men whose voices shaped cities. But what happens when a woman speaks? She's called a witch, a whore, a foreigner, a mistake. Sometimes all three. They tell stories of Aspasia, the brilliant woman behind Pericles, maybe a philosopher, maybe a courtesan, maybe a scapegoat. Her brilliance was only ever spoken of through the mouths of men. Her words, not recorded, they whisper about Phryne. So beautiful, she was put on trial for impiety. Her male defenders won her case by tearing off her clothes in court, not because of her argument, but because of her body. Her voice, not remembered. They tell of Arignote, Theano, Arete, all women who studied under philosophers, wrote treatises, ran schools, but their names are buried. Their ideas survive only in fragments, if at all. You once spoke up during a family gathering. Someone had said that women's minds are smaller, physically smaller, because they aren't built for memory. You laughed. You quoted Hesiod from memory, word perfect. The room went silent. Your husband smiled, tight, embarrassed. He apologized to the guest on your behalf. And later that night, he told you, that sort of thing makes people uncomfortable. So you never quoted poetry again. There are women even now who still dare to speak. Not many, not often, but they do. They argue about property lines. They protest beatings. They question rituals. Some serve as priestesses, voices for the gods. But even then, their own voices are not their own. They channel others. They speak only what's allowed. They echo power. They never hold it. And what happens if you keep speaking anyway? If you write, teach, preach, criticize, in most cases, the city stops pretending. You're branded corrupting, too masculine, too visible, too loud. You are removed from your household, from your community, from history, because it was never just about what you said. It was about who got to speak at all. And if your voice doesn't come from a man's mouth, then it's not a voice. It's a threat. You do not have a name. You used to, before the raid, before the ship, before the auction block. But in Athens, your name has been stripped from you like a stained tunic. They call you Thera now, or Melita, or nothing at all. You're not a citizen, not a woman, not a person. You are property. The wife of your master tells you what to do, but she doesn't look at you. She doesn't speak to you unless it's to scold. She doesn't ask where you're from, doesn't care how old you are. She only cares whether the fire is hot enough, whether the child's feet are washed, whether the wine is properly diluted. You want to scream, but you don't, because screaming gets you beaten, and you've already lost 2 teeth. Your duties shift by the hour. In the morning, you carry water, urns taller than your torso. You sweep the stone courtyard with your bare hands. You wash linen in a basin of cold water and lie until your knuckles bleed. You serve wine with your eyes on the floor. You wake before sunrise. You sleep after midnight. Sometimes not at all. And sometimes you are called to the master's room. No one talks about it. The wife pretends not to hear. The neighbors pretend not to know. But they all do, because everyone knows that when a man has power, he uses it, especially on women who can't say no, especially on women who don't count. If a child comes from it, it won't be acknowledged. It won't be named. It won't inherit anything. It won't be free. You'll raise it in secret if you're allowed, or you'll lose it to fever, exposure, or deliberate silence. And still, you go on, because what else is there? You do not get paid. You do not get rest days. You do not get a voice in court. If you try to escape, you're branded, iron pressed to flesh, a scar to warn others. If you talk back, you are whipped. If you collapse, you are beaten for laziness. And if your master dies, you are part of the inheritance, passed on like a set of spoons. Greek philosophers write about virtue. They write about freedom. They write about justice. But not for you. Aristotle, the brilliant mind of Athens, writes that some people are slaves by nature. He means you. He means your daughters. He means every girl who scrubs floors and bites her tongue and forgets what it's like to walk without flinching at footsteps behind her. You do not appear in epic poems. You are not honored at funerals. You are not carved into statues or painted on urns. You are the hands in the background, the whisper behind the curtain, the shadow at the edge of the symposium, the blood beneath the marble. And yet, you endure, not because you're strong, but because you're not allowed to break. Not until they say you can. Not until your body stops moving. Not until even your suffering is no longer useful. No one celebrated when you were born. Not really. If you were the firstborn girl, the family might pretend for a day, light a small fire, offer a whisper of thanks to Artemis, maybe even allow the neighbors to visit. But behind closed doors, they were disappointed because you weren't a son, you weren't an heir, you weren't a soldier, you weren't an asset, you were a liability. Some girls don't make it past the seventh day. The father inspects the infant. Just a glance. If she seems weak, if she's one of too many mouths to feed, if she simply isn't wanted, she's left outside. Exposure. It's not called murder. It's called custom. No priest will speak of it. No citizen will object. No court will care. If a slave picks her up, she's raised in poverty. If no one does, she returns to the earth without a name. But let's say you survive. You grow. You learn to walk, to speak, to keep your head down. You get your first period, a sign that your body now belongs more to others than to yourself. It's not a private milestone. It's a public shift. Public shift. Now you can be married. Now you can be pregnant. Now you can die, giving life. Because childbirth, it is the most dangerous thing a woman will do in ancient Greece. You lie on a straw-stuffed mat. A midwife kneels beside you with a blade, a cloth, a prayer. There is no anesthesia, no sterile tools, no guarantees. If the baby is breech, the gods decide. If the cord wraps twice, it's fate. If you tear, too bad. If you scream, no one blames you, but no one helps you either. You might bleed to death. You might survive, only to get pregnant again 3 months later. One woman births 12 children and dies at 32. Another loses 5 babies before the 6th, survives. Another dies during her first labor, gasping for breath, while the house remains eerily silent. Because women's deaths aren't interrupted, they are endured. Your body is not yours. It's a conduit for heirs, for lineage, for duty. Your hips are measured, your cycles tracked, your stomach watched, not with love, with expectation. And if you fail, you're blamed. No one carves statues of you. No one builds temples in your name. You're buried in a family plot with a stone that doesn't list your age. Just a husband's name and the number of children you bore. And if you die young, most do infant mortality is high. Women often don't live past 35. Plagues, war, and childbirth leave cemeteries full of the forgotten. But no tragedy is written in ink, just in absence. Because in ancient Greece, to be born female is to begin dying early, bit by bit, birth by birth, breath by breath, and no matter how bravely you carry it. History does not write down pain that doesn't make noise. You grow up in the shadow of marble temples. Their white columns rise above the dust and noise of the streets, casting long shadows over the marketplace and into your life. Each one built to honor a god, each one designed by men, funded by men, entered mostly by men. But still, you believe. You were raised to. You press olive oil into the flame. At your family's altar, you hang garlands around the household idols. You whisper thanks to Hestia for warmth, to Demeter for grain, to Artemis for protection. And when you're bleeding each month, or aching with early contractions, or terrified for your child, you light candles and ask the goddesses to listen. But often they don't. Or if they do, they answer with silence. The gods of Olympus, they are not kind. They are not just. They are reflections of the world. Cruel, chaotic, indulgent, and male. Zeus, king of the gods, father of heroes, serial violator of women. He descends in disguise. Swan, a shower of gold, a stranger in a thundercloud, and leaves behind broken bodies and sons he claims as noble. The women, forgotten, their cries, ignored, their stories, twisted into cautionary myths. Hera, goddess of marriage, punishes the mistresses of her husband, not her husband, not the rapist, the women, because even the goddess of wives has internalized the rules of the patriarchy. Artemis guards maidens, but if you are touched, even by force, you are no longer pure in her eyes. Ask Callisto, ask Daphne, ask any woman whose myth ends in transformation, exile, or death. In the myths, when women defy the gods, they are destroyed. When men defy the gods, they are warned, punished, but rarely erased. Odysseus curses the gods and returns home a hero. Niobe mourns her children too proudly, and they are all slaughtered. You know the rules. You walk carefully between temples. You do not forget a festival. You do not slight a statue. You offer your prayers, your sacrifices, your obedience. Because if you slip, if you bleed on sacred ground, if you speak too boldly, a curse might follow you, or worse, your daughter, because the gods do not forget, and still, you worship, because what else can you do? Faith is the only power you're allowed to have, and even that is borrowed. The priestesses, yes, they exist. They tend sacred fires, lead chants, organize festivals, but they do not write theology. They do not shape doctrine. They do not speak divine law into the courts. They serve. They do not rule. You offer to the gods what little you have: grain, labor, whispered hymns in the dark, and in return, you hope for mercy. But hope is not protection, and the gods, they are made in the image of the men who built their temples. You die at 30, maybe younger, from childbirth, from illness, from a fever that came fast and left you cold before the sun had risen twice. There is no physician, no priest to read your final breath, no funeral oration, no marble tomb, just a grave, a few terracotta offerings, and the name of your husband etched into a rough headstone. Not yours. If you're lucky, they remember you as so-and-so's wife, or the mother of 3 sons, or that woman who didn't cause trouble. If you're unlucky, they don't remember you at all. Your daughters clean the house where you once stood. Your son is told to forget your voice. And the city, the glorious polis you fed, served and prayed for, it doesn't record your death because it never acknowledged your life. History is written on papyrus scrolls, carved into stone, painted onto amphorae, but the hands that hold the stylus, that strike the chisel, they are not yours. Your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, they were spoken aloud in the kitchen, in the courtyard, in whispers, and whispers don't leave evidence. The men have epics. They have names remembered across centuries. Socrates, Pericles, Homer, Leonidas. You were born. You served. You died, and your legacy was absorbed back into the dust, like all the others. We call them ancient Greek women, as if they were one type, one story, one life, but there were thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, each with a soul, each with a voice you'll never hear, because no one wrote it down. Not every woman in ancient Greece was silent. Some resisted, some rebelled, some spoke and paid the price, but most survived in quiet, in resilience, in labor, in love that went undocumented. And when they were gone, the world moved on, because that's what the world does with women. It doesn't need any more. You want to know why it sucked to be a woman in ancient Greece? Because even the gods didn't listen. Because your name was a placeholder. Because your life was an unpaid debt. Because your body was your biography. And when that body failed, the story ended. But here's the truth. You mattered, even if no one carved your name in stone. Even if your prayers went unanswered. Even if you were forgotten, you were there. And now, finally, someone is saying it out loud. You're lying in bed now, aren't you? Lights low, fan humming, eyes half lidded. Maybe you started this just looking for a little background noise, something historical, something dry. But instead, you got all this. The sweat of invisible hands scrubbing stone floors, the echo of sandals on sun-baked roads, the memory of bodies bent under laws written without them. The women of ancient Greece were real, not metaphors, not props in men's speeches, not myths wrapped in marble. Real. They fed children who never knew their names. They lit fires they didn't get to warm themselves by. They bore gods and gave birth to nations, and still they were silenced. And yet, here you are, hearing them, feeling them, maybe, just for a moment, grieving them. That's more than history ever offered, because history was written by their sons, and the pens were never handed to daughters. So if you're drifting off now, let that be the last thought you carry. You are here because someone else wasn't allowed to be. You get to sleep safe because someone else never did. You have a voice because someone else was buried without hers. And maybe tomorrow, when you wake, you'll remember her, the nameless woman behind the temple wall, the slave girl with bruised knuckles and a torn tunic, the mother who didn't make it past her second childbirth, the wife whose cleverness was hidden in dinner recipes and lullabies. Let her live again, in your mind, in your voice, in your memory, because silence is not peace, and being forgotten is not the same as being gone. Good night, sleep deep, and if the past wakes you again, don't turn away, don't turn away.